in Colombia, you can't just arrive and do it on your own. It's impossible. You need political capital, you need muscle, you need influence. And that's the way Colombia is. And Viva was no different. Rupert Bolivar got involved, a huge financial organization. And yeah, obviously the book highlights, Juan Emilio was friends with Alvaro Uribe.
Hello there, and welcome to Wrong Ways Colombia Cast with me, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan. Now, it will come as no surprise to some of you, considering previous interviews I've conducted, that I welcomed, like millions of others, the arrival of Viva Air, formerly Viva Colombia, to this country. To say that there was a mini revolution in the price of domestic airfares in favour of the consumer isn't overstating it. It's been termed the Viva Effect and is detailed in a new book with the same title, which I have here next to me for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. For those of you listening on the podcast, unfortunately, you can't see it, but it's a lovely book. And the author is Rupert Stebbings, and he is our distinguished guest for this episode. Rupert, while the Viva Effect might be obvious in terms of making air travel affordable for the Colombian masses, your work gives us an interesting insight into how it all came about, the turbulence that the company's original founders went through to set it up, and the many management issues they had over the years, and they seem to have had many. It certainly demonstrates that it wasn't simply a matter of time before Colombia would have a low-cost carrier. There were a number of obstacles to overcome, which you can maybe go into more detail for us now.
Sure. Okay, Brendan. Good to be here. I love the word distinguished. I'll take that every day.
Of course.
I think it's the first time it's been applied. There was a bunch of problems. I think one of the ideas with the book was, first of all, set out a history. That's what I graduated in. So I set it out as a history. But I was doing a talk the other day and somebody said, well, there's a lot of characters in the book, but they're actually people. But they are like film characters, a lot of these guys, yeah? And also wanted to kind of set the record straight because, for example, Viva's had 7 CEOs in the first 7 years of operations, which will kind of point the finger to, Jesus, no one wants to be there. It's a revolving door, but it really wasn't. So I wanted to set the record straight on that. So and I did that by, speaking to 6 of the 7 and also, speaking to over 50 people during the history. And that was it. They had all manner of problems. I mean, you get the normal... It's a book about the airline, right? But it could be any business. The first problem in every business is that we don't have any money. We need to stay alive. These guys were sleeping on each other's sofas, working from the house. They rented a house or got lent a house that was falling apart, literally. It was a condemned building. So first of all, you have the problems of money, which went on and on and on. They couldn't get the seed money. And then you move into, the newer stuff, right? Without naming names, although Avianca is the flagship carrier, there were definitely hidden hands behind the scene, trying to make sure things weren't as easy as possible. So, there was a gamut of problems from money, trying to get the registration done. And then once it got operating, 2012 especially, I mean, if it could go wrong, it went wrong in the first 4 months. It's unbelievable. And to hear Declan, when I interviewed him, he said, that's a low-cost airline. These things happen. But to me, again, as an outsider, I'm like, really? These things happen? It's amazing. But they do. But, there was all gamuts of problems.
Yeah.
They just about get everything sorted out. And now, we have COVID just to kind of help the situation along a little further.
Yeah, of course, that's not unique to Viva, at least. Every other airline is suffering that. We might as well put this on the record straight away, Rupert, just in case people are wondering. You are, I guess, in a sense, tied into the company. You are on the board of directors now. You have been since 2017. So we'll declare that interest. But I must say, having read the book, like it's balanced. You're not shying away from calling out maybe people's wrongdoings or things they could have done better. So I think you've done fairly well for somebody who is tied to the company.
Yeah, I mean, I have skin in the game. I'm a board member, but I'm an independent board member. And, when Dec came to me and said, a couple of years ago saying, how about writing a book? You do a lot of blogs, you do a lot of writing. I was like, okay. And he said to me, you write it as you see it. Don't you worry about upsetting people. I want the story told properly. Because if you're polite about everyone, the story would be 1, dull, and 2, it wouldn't be accurate. There were a lot of animosity between the initial team. And this went on through the history because it's a very stressful. I mean, working in airline is stressful at the best of times. A new set-up airline in a hostile environment, a long way from home for a lot of people is difficult, and it leads to stress. And there's no question at all. And I always had the liberty to write what I saw, and I mean, there were things that were removed, but almost everything was left in. I mean, Colombia's a very legalistic country, so you need to know where to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, I certainly hear you on that one. By the way, if people are wondering, and we're talking about Declan, of course, those not in the know, Declan Ryan, the son of the founder of Ryanair, which of course is now Europe's leading low-cost carrier, and Declan Ryan is the chairman, is he? You'll correct me here on this, of Irlandia Aviation. The owner of Irlandia Aviation. An aviation legend, I guess, in many ways. And people who haven't listened, I interviewed Declan, I've interviewed him a couple of times, but earlier in the summer, the European summer, I think July time. And Declan will probably like to hear this, that his podcast has been the most listened to podcast I've had this year. So fair play. But that's Declan Ryan.
Happy man.
Yeah, he will. I'm sure he will. It's the missing link on his career path. The most listened to podcast for Wrong Way Corrigan. Anyway, I want to come back, though, to the original founders, because reading the book, in one sense, it feels like it's like a rags to riches for the four original founders. But if you scratch below the surface, Rupert, I mean, these were guys who were well connected, it's fair to say, and then went to study in Stanford. So to put it in a kind of rags to riches might be overstating it.
Yeah, I don't think there were many rags around, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think if you went out and put a film script together and looking for four characters and wanted four different characters, you have to go a long way. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. William's a big ass personality from Mexico. He's a larger than life personality. Doesn't look Mexican, big, tall, blonde, American looking guy. Then you got him and Gabrielle, and Gabrielle's this diminutive Brazilian who's a brilliant mind, brilliant mathematician, brilliant with numbers. And then you got, Juan Emilio, who's been in the Bogota sector for a long time, ex-Avianca. And then Fred's just the nice, go-along, easy-going guy. They're just four different characters, but by an unusual set of circumstances, they came together and they stuck it through. I mean, it wasn't easy. As you see, not long after it got launched, things started to fall apart. There's a chapter called "The Band Breaks Up" or something like that.
Yeah,
through that, and it was kind of inevitable. I think there was so much, like a lot of bands that get to the top, things suddenly start falling apart. And I mean, in hindsight, probably it was obvious it was coming, but they were all determined to get their name on an airline, to succeed, and they did succeed, and then they went their different ways.
Yeah, and of course now none of them involved with the project at all at the moment.
No, all different ways. I think they're all currently they're all back in Colombia again. They've been traveling since, but now they're all back in Colombia.
Okay.
Keep in touch with them, obviously, but they're all doing separate things.
And of course now Irlandia is fully behind the Viva project, but they weren't at the beginning, and you had Grupo Bolivar. But the palanca, and again, for English speakers, that kind of influence that you can have here in Colombia, that was important, it seems, especially for a couple of the founding fathers, being friends with the likes of Álvaro Uribe when you want to get a project off the ground in the greater Medellin area is not a bad thing at all.
No,
so
I mean, you've been here long enough. In Colombia, you can't just arrive and do it on your own. It's impossible. You need political capital, you need muscle, you need influence. And that's the way Colombia is. And Viva is no different. I mean, Grupo Bolivar got involved. A huge financial organization, good people. They invest in all manner of projects. So that was great. And obviously the book highlights, Juan Emilio was friends with Álvaro Uribe. Obviously a major mover and shaker in Medellin, well, if not the country. So you need these people. It's impossible just to arrive in Colombia and set up a business. It doesn't work. Very rarely.
Of course. Well, one thing that stood out for me as well, when Irlandia was maybe just kind of, not fully involved, or like certainly didn't have 50% of the project, it felt like that they were almost happy if it failed. It was like, okay, we'll move on. That they didn't seem too bothered. That's what kind of came out of it from my reading of it.
No, Deck was bothered. Everyone in the airline, but they've got a story of success from the DNA from Ryanair. Obviously, they go to Singapore, big success. US, big success. Mexico, huge success. Yeah, I think failure was an option for them, but they got to a point where it's like, enough of this crap. We need to sort this out. We need to get control of the situation. The boardroom split into two groups, or factions, if you want to use a different word. Mm-hmm. And Deck just got to a point where he needed to, I need to get out of Mexico because Mexico's not going to IPO. I need to bring that money down here. I need to buy out the rest and get on with it. I know his determination is fierce, and it remains that way. No question at all. But it got to a point, an impasse for maybe a year and a half, where nothing was going anywhere. No one wanted to invest more money because people weren't happy. And that had to be organised. It was organised in 2017.
Yeah, and then that's when Irlandia took full control of Viva. He kind of seems like Declan, and again, he might like me saying this, but he is an undercurrent in the book throughout. It seems like he's the Kaiser Soze or something in this. And then he finally gets 100% of the company.
He's a modest man. I mean, you know him. A lot of people do know him. He's a modest guy. He's achieved immense amounts of stuff. And this runs not just through the airline, but I'm not going to talk about it in detail because he hates it, but his philanthropy is famous. Even though it's low profile, it's famous. You can't avoid it. And he's the same with the airline and everything he does. He just lets people get on with it. Like you say, he's a Kaiser. He's the hand on the tiller, right? But he tries to let it run itself. And I think that's the difference in Viva. The guys in Irlanda found themselves much more involved than they had previous in other countries. In other countries, he sent Tony out to Singapore. He knew Tony. Tony took care of it. And I think in other countries they had to put in less time and effort. But here he's been more visible because it's needed more input from him. I mean, he took over himself for 4 or 5 months as CEO because he needed to. He said to me himself in the interview, and he said, "Look, that's not my game. I don't want to do a CEO. It's not what I like to do. But occasionally it's good to get down in the weeds and see what's going on." He enjoyed his 4 months. He got good feedback, and but he's doesn't want to be the figurehead. He's there on the board, but again, it's done quietly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about Declan, but I think maybe perhaps also there's the fact might be that he's enamored with Colombia too, maybe more so than the other countries, and he wants to be more hands-on here, maybe. Well,
he does love Colombia. He's making a desperate effort to learn the language.
A desperate effort, yeah.
It's a work in progress. He's up cycling in the hills. He's here constantly. He loves it in Colombia, and you can tell if you see him writing about Colombia or an email or any kind of article. His passion for the country is huge, and it goes to the core. He's, to my opinion, in the list of airlines they've done. Okay, Ryanair, developed country. Singapore, basically a developed country. US, developed country. He goes to Mexico. We're moving a little bit into emerging markets. Now he's moved fully into emerging markets, and here you're really seeing the effect of like democracy in terms of, offering seats to everyone being able to get on board. I think Colombia, everyone knows, on the Gini factor, Colombia is as equal as any country there is. So, I think here he feels and sees the impact even further. And it's touched on in the book, it's a whole different public.
Yeah, of course. And it's something I put on my Instagram when I was reading it, the little stories about people getting on the planes and the questions that they had and the doubts. It seems from another world.
You don't believe it, and that's the short list of questions. When I asked the girl in sales about it, I said, I can't put all these in the book. It's just pages, but it was question after question. When she told me the guy was asking if the pilot, she could get the pilot's number or the pilot could call her, she was late. I said, that's a joke, right? And she went, and it was more than one person who asked the same question.
Right, and good to know who's flying your plane. I'd like to know as well. Excellent. But it is, interesting. Of course, you might be aware of the saying that they have here around Bogota anyway, that what works in Dinamarca, as in Denmark in Europe, doesn't always work in Cundinamarca.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to adapt to the market. In a more general issue, though, Rupert. Like, it seems a strange time in one sense to be having what could be seen as a panegyric for Viva or low-cost carriers in general. And this is something, obviously, I've addressed with Declan before, that especially now with COVID and people saying we need to maybe change about how we go about our business, more Zoom calls and things like that rather than face-to-face meetings. And people might blame, if I can use that word, low-cost carriers for the increase in travelling, and that we need to reappraise how we go about doing things. And this could spell, well, I won't say the end, but difficulties for low-cost carriers.
No, I don't see it. I mean, the legacy carriers are the guys. If you look at the guys who've been carrying people, one of the things in Viva, Ryanair's got a good business participation because of their on-time record, no? Mm-hmm. Colombia so far, the businessman here is obsessed with the VIP lounge, the Avianca miles, etc., right? So, you know, the big companies here always send their people on Avianca. There's a massive snob value. There's no other way to discuss it. There's a snob value. I want to be on Avianca. This is the cool place to be. But it's got nothing to do with being on time or cost or anything else. So I look at it completely the other way. I mean, these big, heavy, big planes going backwards and forwards, you know, there's no need for it, you know. And, you know, we're trying to get into that space, but we're trying to fly people who essentially are not going for business. I'm going home to see my parents. I need to go there to do an event. The guys jamming the business passengers up in Bogota to Medellin especially have largely been Avianca. And obviously the Zoom culture, that's going to impact. I mean, I go to Bogota a lot for meetings. I used to go twice a month minimum. I don't see that happening now. Now maybe once a month, maybe less, because I've had better contact with my team in Bogota than I've ever had, because I'm sat on Zoom with them and we're constantly. So I think going forward, you know, everyone goes about low cost expansion, but in the end, it'll be a survival of the fittest, and the fittest, I think, will be the low cost, because essentially you can't continue charging people huge amounts to go up and down. If you can do it if you can go to Bogota for 250,000 pesos, why are you going to pay 500,000?
No, certainly.
And you know, we're not creating lounges. We're not taking up that space. If you look at what we're doing going forward, we've got the Neo planes coming in. You know, these are much lower fuel burn, environmentally friendly. I mean, no plane is ever going to be fully environmentally friendly until we got a solar plane. But we're doing what we can, you know, and I think that's key. So I think that's an argument it's a good argument to have maybe if you're going into one of the major blue chip companies. But I wouldn't try and have that argument on the street with somebody who's never flown a plane before. And then you're going to turn around and say to them, sorry, no, we don't want low cost because it's not environmentally friendly. I think they see things slightly differently. I think they would say, my need to go on holiday or visit my family on the coast is much bigger than the need for somebody to fly from Bogota to Medellin for a businessman. I think that's how I see it.
Yeah, I get leaner and greener is the expression that's come into my head for that.
There you go.
And in the book you mentioned, though, about the 50 planes that Avianca have ordered. Am I right in saying that about half of them have arrived now?
No, I think about a third have ordered, because the orders run up right to 24, 25. No, about a third have come in. Obviously, that slowed down slightly during the pandemic because all the way up the food chain, everything slowed down, you know, where there was errors or deliveries or workshops. So about a third are in. The idea is to roll them out over the next 4 or 5 years.
But so you are going to roll out those 50 planes, because I thought that might be a concern if we're talking about fewer people traveling over the next few years.
Yeah, but every time you bring a plane in, a lot of times you retire. The original fleet has been retired back, right? So they're being sent back to the lessors. They're done. So, you know, we're still looking for a total of 50. Remember, that's across Colombia and Peru and wherever else we happen to go afterwards. For example, we went down to, I don't want to give away too many secrets, but we picked up the Uruguayan football team and brought them up from Montevideo the other day on the new Neo, because now the Neo has the range. So suddenly when you've got the new range, 5-6 hours, at the moment we go to Lima and we go to Miami, 3-4 hours. But when you can suddenly reach New York, Dallas, Mexico City, and go south as well, you're opening new markets. So you got places to put those planes.
Okay.
So give it putting 50 planes in Colombia, which at the moment is the Avianca fleet, to put it in context. You got to look at it for now and go and feel where will we be in 4 or 5 years? Where else will we be flying?
So can Brendan Corrigan write down Montevideo as a potential destination in the years to come from Bogota.
Like what you could do is when Colombia play away, and hopefully they'll do better this time, you could maybe hop a ride with the Colombians.
Oh, that'd be interesting. By the way, I was going to blame then Viva Air, because I'll make a little bit of a joke here, but maybe if Avianca had flown the Uruguayan team here, they might have been delayed and arrived tired. So I'm blaming.
But we don't fly to Quito, so we're not responsible for that one.
Okay, no, but I'm saying when you brought the Uruguayan,
we can't be responsible for everything.
Okay, right, yeah. Well, you'll take 50-50 blame on that. So one final thing on the book, Rupert. A constant theme again is the kind of Viva family, and that comes through a lot of the time in an emotional sense. There's been some losses that you've had there, yeah. But I kind of juxtapose that in some sense with what seems like, and I know he's a businessman, but kind of the ruthlessness of Declan Ryan at times, you could say, when he finally got rid of William Shaw, one of the original founders, after bringing him back in. So it kind of seems that little bit of a juxtaposition there.
Yeah, I mean, the family's always been there. To be honest, if they weren't family, I think a lot of guys wouldn't have stuck in. I mean, you speak to the guys who were there in the commercial side, the people who witnessed people being attacked, by passengers. I mean, these people wouldn't have stuck it out if they didn't love the project. The whole Chachafruto warehouse office was just a ridiculous thing with a football pitch at the back and everyone's stealing everyone's food and everything else. So it's a massive family thing, but at the same time, that's fine. But it needs to be a controlled family, right? And the family only works if the management work, and if the management isn't working at the time, in the end, it is a business. And Declan's got more experience than anyone in Colombia in this respect, and decisions have to be made. And from what I can see, this is the thing with the CEOs, just read through the book, right? One went through tragic circumstances, another through a near tragedy, and the events just unraveled, right? In terms of, when did a certain CEO come in? Normally it was a circumstance which was unforeseen. So, and William, for example, was given his shot, didn't work out, Dec had to make a decision. And, if you work in the financial market, the first cut is the cheapest. And, you need to make decisions fast. And I think Declan makes fast decisions. The day he sat down to take over, he immediately decided, my main job here is to look for my successor. So they're immediate decisions. And if they're not made immediately, and that's where we got into this issue when, Declan was running the board, when Emilio was the CEO, and the board was split in two. And this impasse, which Declan couldn't control, is when the airline didn't flounder, but it lost 2 years of its life. I mean, if without that impasse for 2 years, this airline would be far further on. That's the situation. So, somebody has to control it, and that's the situation. And I think that was the driver to make sure Dec said, right, I need to have control of this. The same thing happened in Mexico. He didn't have a controlling stake. So in the end, the Mexicans said, well, we can't get the IPO off the ground. Excuse the pun. We're going to leave it as a private company. Their Canierlander's exit strategy historically has been the IPO. So if they're not going to IPO, you're just sat there in a company that's just going along, can't control the situation. So I think he learned the lesson from Mexico that he needed to be in control, and that's why he took control, and then decisions can be made much quicker.
Okay, yeah. Excuse me. Interesting indeed. By the way, one thing you mentioned in the book as well, and I like this as a writer too, that there are a lot of metaphors and puns you can use when you're writing about the airline industry.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
It's almost, you write them and you're like, and somebody's rereading it and they go, you've done a pun there, and you're like, where? Didn't even say, takeoff, landing, blue sky, ice.
Yeah. Turbulence, even that as well, and I mentioned that in my introduction. But anyway, I just want to talk about you kind of more personally, or your other hat, because I had Simon Ford, who's the UK's honorary consul in Cali, and you're the honorary consul in Medellin, yes?
Yeah, I've been doing that me and Simon actually got appointed around the same time. I'm going to say 6 years ago now, 6 and a bit. They used to have a consul here for quite a long time, a local guy. He left after about 25 years. They left it for a couple of years. Then again, they ran into and this is business-wide, any business-wide here, Paisas and Rolos. It's very difficult to communicate from Bogota with Medellin on a remote basis. So they asked me 6 years ago, if I'd be interested. Obviously I was. I'm a big patriot. And yeah, no, it's another aspect of my life. It was very, very interesting. I have to say, yeah, it's not, again, it's an honorary role. It's not every day, but usually something comes up, and usually something to do with visas, which have nothing to do with me whatsoever. Just for the record, do not call me on visas, anyone. I have no control. But
Rupert, by saying that now, you're probably going to get a load of messages.
But if you want to go through Brendan's, Instagram, that for us.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll be the gatekeeper.
Yeah. No, but it's been good. I would say fun. It is fun because you get, if somebody comes into town, you get to meet them. Yeah, there's also it's everything. It's business, a business side to it, commercial side, but then your main priority is taking care of the Brits up here. There's a couple of hundred of them. A lot of them are living like Ben Gunn in the hills, so you never see them. They're fully assimilated. But yeah, I mean, you're around. If they've got advice, you're there.
Okay, yeah, well, I might get my Irish passport revoked because I've had your boss, in that sense, the ambassador, Colin Martin Reynolds. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
And Simon Ford with his coffee company down in Cali, and now you. So I've only had the Irish ambassador and one consul, so I might get into trouble for giving a preference to the Brits.
I think on per capita head, you've probably done more from the Irish embassy.
Well, yeah. In fairness, yeah, you're right on that one. Last thing on the book, then, which I'll show again for those watching on YouTube. Where can they pick it up?
The Spanish one.
And the Spanish one, which is more colourful, actually. It's got blue in it. Where can people get it if they want either version, English or Spanish?
So if you want to go in Spanish, go in reverse way around, I would say all normal outlets, Panamericana, Libreria. It's online at Libreria and Planeta. And then you can go on Amazon and get Kindle. One Books in Ireland has got the physical copy, online copy as well. So I would say the Apple, I don't do Apple, I'm on the other side, but the Apple people tell me it's available on the Apple website to download.
Okay. So, well, anyway, they can, and they can get in touch with you, I guess, as well, if they want to, but not about visas, about the book.
Oh, yeah, may as well. LinkedIn is just banged out with people asking me, where can I get it? I had a guy in Italy saying I need an English copy. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. Let me work through that. Okay.
How much does it retail for here in Colombia, by the way?
I think it's 49,000 pesos, so like $12.
Yeah. Okay.
It's well priced in space. There's no question at all. And the other thing is, all the profits go to charity, which is, if the book looks a lot at breast cancer. There's a whole chapter dedicated to this because we had two CEOs who lost their mothers through breast cancer. We've had our own air stewardess who's named on the pink plane. She had breast cancer and survivor. But also in the Viva Foundation, which I think is the only airline foundation in Latin America. They were in San Andreas last weekend and Providencia looking at what we can do up there. So we're doing work up there with the children. Everyone's talking about food, but we found out what the children actually want is clowns, toys, things, psychologists. So we're working on that. So all the profits in the book goes straight to the Viva Foundation.
Okay, great stuff. And now I've one last piece of work to do here because Declan has kindly given us a free flight. Now this is only for people watching or listening, depending on what medium you're viewing this, for people in Colombia. But for the next 48 hours from when I publish this, which I think I'll publish this on Friday. But anyway, from when it's published, 48 hours, write the answer to the following question. And you have to tag in my blog. That's my own little bit of publicity on this. That's at Wrong Way Corrigan blog.
Ruthless.
It is, yeah, I'm ruthless now. On Facebook. So at Wrong Way Corrigan blog, you'll find it on Facebook. So tag my Facebook page and including a link to this podcast, or be it the YouTube video. So you have to do those two things and answer the following question. What's the English acronym that the original founders called what is now Viva Air? And you will still see this acronym, which makes up a common word in English, on Viva planes. Will you, Rupert? It's still there somewhere, I think.
It's still there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you can read the book and then you'll find it.
Exactly. You'll find it in the first few pages. Yeah. I mean, should we give any other clue? I don't think we need any other clue.
It depends on the people who are watching, but I'd imagine your watchers are intellectuals, so they don't need any more.
Well, it begins with an F, and it's got 4 letters. There you go. I don't think I can give away. So what you have to do, just a reminder, guys, is tag at Wrong Way Corrigan blog on Facebook, a link to the podcast, and put in your answer. And we'll leave that window open for 48 hours, and then we will select the winner at random. There we go. Okay, Rupert.
Am I allowed to win?
Well, it might seem like a little bit of an insider job. It'll remind me of a Father Ted episode when they were trying. Well, we can arrange anything here, Rupert. Who knows? Rupert Stebbings, the author of The Viva Effect, to show it once again, also available in Spanish. No, thanks a million for joining us. And hopefully we might have you back on maybe to talk about more about your life here in Colombia. You've been here like...
Mate, it'll be great to come back because, this is one thing I do, but always available, great fun, and good luck with everyone with the prize.
Yeah, well, and you might see Rupert on that flight. Who knows where we get it. Okay, guys, that's it. That's our lot for this episode of Wrong Ways Colombia Cast. Remember, you can tweet me as well at WWayCorrigan. But until the next time, ciao, ciao.